I can hear you. Go on.
Cool. And I also hope you guys can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Let me get a thumbs up. Cool. So thank you, Agnes. So hi everyone. My name is Albert. Um, I'm a technical mentor in Moringa School. Professionally, I'm a software engineer, but I'm also a learner. So kindly feel free to reach out to me on Twitter and LinkedIn with the preferred names above. So I'll just jump to the session itself. And on today's session, we are supposed to build something using a simple web application using HTML and CSS. And I'll explain what these are as we continue. But before we jump to that, I have a picture of what we are supposed to do. So this is the final product that we are supposed to build, and we're going to build this using what we know as the HTML and CSS. So before I do anything, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder in my desktop. So I'll jump to my desktop. And for the guys who are using Ubuntu, you can do that using the terminal with the following command. So you can cd is just to change directory, just to move from one point to the other. So I'll move to the desktop folder, and then within the desktop folder, I'm going to create a folder. Okay. So for the guys who are using Windows, you can right click, create a new folder, then give it a name. For the guys who are using Ubuntu, we can do that by using a command called mkdir, which means make directory. So directory in Windows is just a folder. Then I'm going to give it a name. So for this, I'm going to give it a session. Press enter, then I'll jump into that particular folder called session. Now, inside this particular folder called sessions, I hope my screen is visible. I'm going to create a file and a folder. So for us to create files in Windows, again, right click, create a file. For the guys who are using Ubuntu, we use a command called touch, then the file name. I'm going to give it index, or rather, let me give it home.html. So the .html is an extension that is going to tell whatever I'm going to use is kindly create for me a file, and the file type is going to be what we call as an HTML. So I'm going to open this with my VS Code, then I'll explain to you what HTML is. Now, in the world of web development, when you want to create a structure of your web page without having anything, we use a structured language. Okay, we use a language called HTML. So one HTML
Albert, I'm not sure whether it's just me, but your connection is not the best. Would you check on that? Hey, Albert, can you hear us? Your connection is breaking.
is hypertext markup
Hey, Albert, can you hear me?
language.
Okay, I'm not sure whether he can hear me, but the connection is not the best.
Basically, the purpose of this language, markup language, not programming language, markup language is just to create the structure of a page like. So
Albert, we could barely hear you. Can you hear us now?
yeah, I can hear you. What about me? Can you guys hear me
We
now?
have lost you for like a whole 5 minutes. We couldn't hear you, and I think you couldn't see the
Sorry,
messages as well.
sorry, guys. What about now? I hope I'm audible.
I can hear you now. I hope we can keep that consistent, but we can hear you clearly.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry guys about that. So I'm going to repeat
Yeah,
what
you
I
might
was
need to
just
start.
doing earlier. Okay, I'm going to start from the top. Okay. Cool. So what I've done so far is what I was doing is I was trying to create a file in the folder Windows machine, then give it a name. So the same thing happens when you want to create a file. You right click, give that particular file a name with an extension, then you save. Now for the guys who are using Ubuntu, we can do this using the terminal. So what I'm currently using. And for us to do that, for you to create a file, you use the command touch, then the file name. So you can give it touch home.html, home.css, depending with the type of file you want to create. So far, that is what I've done, and open that particular folder called sessions with my text editor, and I'm using VS Code.
Albert, please share your screen.
Okay. And I'm using VS Code for this demo. Now, within that particular folder, again, I've created a file and given it a name called home.html. So the .html, the extension .html is going to tell my browser that this particular file that I'm going to use is an HTML file. Now, HTML in full is hypertext markup language, and basically the purpose of this markup language is just to create the structure of our web page. How do you want that particular web page, to be structured? And for us to achieve this particular structure, we use what we call the HTML. Again, it is a markup language. So inside this particular home.html, we are now going to use what you call tags and elements to create the structure. And so far, what I have from line 1 to line 11 is just, a structure or a boilerplate of the way an HTML, rather a web page, looks like. Now, in line 1, I have an exclamation with a doc type HTML. So basically, what is happening in line 1 is to tell the browser that the document type that I'm going to use is an HTML, right? So this one is just the doc type, and the doc type is HTML. That is the first point. Then in line 2, I'm having a tag HTML. It has a closing tag, so we have this and this. So this is just a closing tag for that. And I'm passing an attribute. So an attributes are just extra information that we pass to this particular HTML element or tags. So sorry, tags. So the attribute is lang. So lang is language. So it means this particular document type or this particular page is going to be written in English. That's what we have here called lang, and the lang is English. So EN means English. Then moving forward, we have two major parts that I want us to talk about. One is the head, and the next is the body. Now within the head, we are going to provide extra information or data that you want to use in this particular page. For example, that is the point that if you want to reference to certain external URL, for example, CSS or any other thing, that is the point we have to put them within the head. So for example, we have the meta, which just describe the character set, which is a UTF-8, just a Unicode, just a way of decoding data. And then you also have the viewpoint, which just basically have the content, which is also an attribute. Basically take the width to be the device minus width. So take the width of the device, then minus the width that you're going to provide. Then we have the title. So for us, the title is document. I'm going to name this, for example, to something extra. So I'm going to have that as home, the title. Then lastly, we have the body. Now, if you want anything to appear on your page, it has to be enclosed within the body tag. So this tag and this tag. So anything that you're going to have here is what is going to be displayed within that particular page. So for example, I'm just going to have a very small example and give it an H1. So H1 means heading 1. So we have from heading 1 to I think heading heading 6, sorry. I'm going to give it an H1 and give it a name home. Okay. Then I'm going to open this to my browser. Now, for you to view this structure, again, remember you're trying to create a web page. For you to view this web page on your browser, we use an extension called Live Server. Now, if you want to install the extension, just go to the extension, then look for Live Server. Yep, so you're going to install this. You're going to use this just to preview what you are building on the browser bit of it. So I have that installed. So if you don't have that, take the next minute, just install that. Then I'll go back to the first thing I get is open with live server. This is happening because I have the extension already installed. So I'm going to click that and it's going to open again. Let me just take all of this, then come here. So let me close that. Give me 1 second. Right click, open the live server. Cool. So you can see I have some content on my page, and this content is just having home, and home is an H1 within the body tag. Cool. So basically, again, HTML just used to create the structure of the page. And if you want anything to be displayed on the page, then it has to be within the body tag. So before I continue, do we have any question up to that point? Do we have any question? And let me get a thumbs up if we are all together before we continue. Thumbs up on the chat maybe will give me some reaction before we continue. So silence means okay. Thank you, Anthony, for that. Cool. So let's just continue. Now, I want to build a page. And for me to build a page, I want to incorporate a lot of technologies to build this. So one of them is HTML. Then the next thing that I want to do is I want to style. Now think about you trying to build a house from scratch. So normally what happens is you start by drawing the structure of your house, how you want that particular house to look like. That is one. Secondly, you now create a structure with just cement, nothing, create that particular structure without having anything. Then the next part is now applying, paints to, how you want that particular house to look. Okay. Then lastly if, for example, you want to have lift, you want to have your power, then that is the last bit. Now, we use the same technique when you want to create a web page. So basically, the first thing you have to do is you have to create, you have to draw the way you want that particular web page to look like. And that is what I have within this particular picture, okay? Then the next step that follows is creating the structure using HTML, which we are going to use or we're going to create in a few minutes. Then the next step is now to style. Now, when you want to style a page, we use something we call CSS. So CSS is just a cascading style sheet. So if you want to apply styles to your HTML, then we use what we call the CSS. There are a lot of ways on how to use that. So you can use internal CSS, which basically means we have them inside here, or you can go ahead and have a separate file for that, and that is what we know as external CSS. So when creating CSS file, again, right click, give it any name. So I'll give it styles.css. So basically, this means this one is a cascading style sheet. Just basically a file that is going to contain all our styles. So that is CSS, and that is basically what I want us guys to use to create this particular web page. Now, before I continue to having all these things, I want to create my folder structure. So this folder structure again really matters a lot when you want to, create a very big project. So I'm going to create a folder, and I'm going to give it a name called assets. I'm going to give it a name called assets. And then inside this particular asset, I'm going to create another two folders. So the first folder is CSS. So basically, it's just going to contain all my cascading style sheets, all of them. I'm going to have them there. Then I'm also going to have another one called images. And this is going to contain all the images that I want as guys to use. So let me grab these particular images. Let me grab these particular images. Just give me a second. Let me grab these particular images. So I have them somewhere here. Yep, so I have them here. So let me just grab them. I'm going to move them to desktop. So in desktop, I had a folder called session. Then I'm going to have them here. Images. So I have them there. So cool. So that if I come here, check, you can see I have the different images that I want us guys to use. So let me rename this to image with small I. Cool. So that is the first thing. Now, in this particular webinar, we are not going to have our custom CSS. Rather, we are going to use something to help us in styling. And this is the point. I introduced something called Tailwind CSS. Now, think about Tailwind CSS as a library that has different stylings with different classes. So what you do is you just call a class that have certain stylings. For example, I'll jump here. I'll give you an example of what we have here. Okay, what we have here. So let me just have padding. Just scroll padding, and I'll explain what padding is. So you can see, for example, when I go to padding, there we have different classes with different properties. For example, I have p-0, which means padding 0, px just how dimension. Then you have px hyphen 0, so that is padding left and padding right to be both 0px. So we're going to use this Tailwind to help us style our projects. So for you to access this, you go to tailwind.css, then you go to the document bit of it. And in the document bit of it, they just tell us how do you now install this particular Tailwind so that we can use this in our project. Now, with a lot of ways on how to use that, and because we're using HTML, I'll jump to play with CDN. So CDN is just a link that is hosted somewhere in a server that's going to allow us to access this. So for us to use that, we just copy this link. Again, you can see it has a defined skeleton of an HTML page with a doc type HTML head. And then we are going to have this script source, then the path, or rather the URL is this particular URL, and then we close this particular tag. So I'm going to copy this, then I'll bring that to my page. Okay, so having this alone, again, gives us the mandate to now start using classes from Tailwind. Now, for example, let me just come here. And within this particular H1, I'm going to give it a color. So for example, if I want to use a color, we can come here and just Google text color. You can see we have different text colors that are here. So I want us to try one and see if that alone is going to allow us to use that. So I'm going to give this text amber, then that. So I'm going to call that particular class. And then if I now go back and check, you can see something has happened. I'm going to zoom. One thing you can see has happened. So initially I had that. You can see, check the font size first, kind of bigger. But now when I bring back this particular class, something is not happening. So let's check again. So I'm going to give it a different size. So let me come back here. Font size. Then we can do text XL just to give it as a font size of 20px. So I'm going to have text XL. So we have text, then XL, that is the class name, just to make sure it has a font size of something. So it's not working. So let me do this. Come back here, live server. Cool. You can see it's now becoming a little bit bigger depending on the class that we are going to use. So basically, that is how we have Tailwind CSS within our HTML page. So before we continue, do we have any question on how to use Tailwind, rather how to install Tailwind within our page? Before now we jump to creating what we have. Do we have any question? If not, let me get a thumbs up so that we can continue. So what is another way of using it without having the CDN? Now, it depends with the language that you're using. For instance, if you go to the documentation, so it depends with the language you're using. For us, we are using vanilla HTML. So the only way to use it using HTML is using the CDN, right? It's only using the CDN. But now when it comes to using other frameworks, then they also have their ways of using that. For example, if you want to use it on Angular or any other language, then it also has a different way. For example, if you're using React, then you have to install that. And because we're using vanilla HTML, then it means the only way to go with that is using the CDN. I hope that has answered the question. Cool. So I'm sorry, which apps are you using? I'm not using any app. I'm just using VS Code as my text editor. Now, Before we continue, the last thing I want to do before I forget is if you check on the documentation, especially on the Play with CDN, so let me just go back. Document, let me just zoom out for a minute. Cool. Cool. So let's just continue. Now, what you want to do next is now to try to come up with this particular design that we have here. So basically convert this into the actual web page. Now, what we have there is divided into majorly 3 parts. So I'll explain the parts. So one, we have the header. So the header contains the logo that we have on the top left. You also have the navigation bar that is in the middle. Then you also have the icon that is on the far left. That is the header. Then you also have the downer part, which contains the image itself and the big text that says grocery deliver in 5 minutes with some things there with an, some buttons that we have there. Now, the first step that we have to do is we have to define this structure using the HTML before we use the CSS, and that is what we are going to do here. So allow me to do away with this for now. And for us to achieve this, we are going to divide these into sections. Now, when dividing things into sections in HTML, we can use something, rather we can use a tag called a div tag. Okay. So I'm going to call a div tag. Let me make this bigger. So I'm going to call a div. So I'm going to have a div here. So that is the first div. Okay. Then inside this particular div, I'm going to have different sections. One is the nav. So what I'm currently doing is I'm using what we call the HTML tags. So this one is a tag, this one is a div tag, and then the nav tag is going to help us to create the navigation bar. But for us to divide them different sections, we use what called the div tag. Okay, so we have the first div, and then into that particular div, we have what we call the nav. Now, the nav is just going to contain this. So let me just do something here. Let me just make it better so that we can. Cool. So we're going to have the nav, which contains this particular image, this particular navigation links, and then we also have the icon on the far right. Now, I'll come into this particular nav, and then I'm going to call the image. Now, for us to have image in HTML, we use the img tag. Now, this img tag is a self-closing tag. It's different with other tags that has both closing and opening tag. For instance, if you see what I'm having within the nav, I'm having this is an opening tag, and this is a closing tag. But the image itself has its self-closing tag. So this one we call a self-closing tag. So I'm going to have the image, and this particular image is going to have a source. Source is just a path to the image that you want to use. And you can see the image is the logo. So if you come here and check the logo, that is the image. So I'm going to define the path to that particular image. Now, for us to define the path, you can see we have the image folder inside the asset folder. So we're going to access the image folder through the asset folder. So if I press the dot means the current folder. Within the current folder, which is the session, go to another folder called assets, and then into this particular folder, go to another folder called images, and then grab me the logo.png. So PNG is just an extension that you can use. So we have that logo there. So if I save that and without doing anything, go back to my page, which was here, you can see I'm having something. I'm having this. And you can see the background is white. That's why we can't see the white text, but we are going to fix that in a minute. So let's start by fixing that. And the way to fix that is, you can see we have a background image. We have a background image. So we're going to have that particular background image. And we're going to have that background image within the div itself. So I'll come here and call a class. Now, this particular class is, we are going to call the class and have a background image. So the next question is, how do we then have a background image in Tailwind CSS? So I'll jump back to the documentation. Then I'll come here, just Google background image, press enter. So we have different background images. So here we are using gradients, so gradient is just a color. But for us, we want to have an image itself. So if you scroll down, and then come here, where you have the arbitrary values where you can have an image. So I'm going to copy this class. So call bg hyphen then the path to that particular image. So I'm going to copy the whole of this class. So that is the power of having documentation. Then I'll bring that here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this image. So I'm just going to copy this again, just to be quick. Then have that here. But for us, the image that we're going to use is now different. So if you go to images, then we have image. As you can see, we have that. So I'm going to change this. So instead of pointing at the logo, I'm going to point at the image.png. So when I do that, check what happens. So if I now come back here, you can see I'm having an image. But the image is quite small. It means it's not taking the entire screen. So how do we then fix this? Now, for us to fix this, I'm going to use another class called container, right? And basically, when I call the class container, just how do you fix things, or how do you fix elements within certain width? When I call a class container, it's going to have all these particular classes that, or rather these particular properties that are here. So we need to give it a width of 100%. So take the entire width. So also going to give it a max width when a certain screen is met. Now, so if you go to a screen that has these particular dimensions, rather a small screen that is 640px, then it's going to have the maximum width to be that. So I'm going to call this particular class name called container here. So I'm going to pass that here. Check here, nothing happens. So you can see it has picked the width to be 100px, but again, it is not working. I'm also going to pass, rather I'm going to give it a minimum height. So I'll come back here. And just Google minimum height, enter. So we have different properties. And for me, what I want to do is, because you can see the width and the height is not making sense, I want to give this div to have the minimum width, rather the height to be the screen of whatever I'm going to use. For example, right now I'm using a laptop. I want to make sure that when I'm going to open this within the laptop, then the minimum screen has to be the screen that I'm using. And for us to achieve that, again, check on the styles here. There's one called minimum height screen, which basically takes the minimum height to be 100 view height. View height basically means the view that you are viewing at that particular point, or rather the device that you're using, it's going to give it the minimum height of that particular device. So I'll come here and give it minimum height, right? And for us to achieve that, minimum height, you use m-h screen. So I'm going to have that here. I'm going to have that there. Okay, so when I have that, see what happens. So if I come here and check, you can see something has happened. So the screen is now a little bit, sorry, the image has taken the entire width, rather the image has taken the entire width. So looks things are okay. So we can see you can see the icon that we have there that we wanted to see. So let's just continue. So from there, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to have this and this, and for us to create this, we use what we call list in HTML. So we have different lists, and for us, I'm going to use what we call the unordered list. So you don't have a specific order. That's an ordered list. So under the image, I'm going to create a list, and the list is an ordered list. And then I'm going to have now the list items that I want to use. So we have home, about, feature, and contact. So there are 4. So I'm going to have this copied 4 times just to save time. So we have home. That is the first one. We have about. That is the second one. We have features. Then lastly, we have contact. So we have contact. Then after the image, after the list, sorry, we are also going to have another image, this one. So I'm also going to have that. Let me just copy whatever we have there. Then I'm going to change that to the cat. The cat. So I'll come and say have the cat. And then if you now come and check, you can see we have this, but the text is not visible. So let me just change the color of this text. And for us change the color of text, again, you come here, just check on text color, then we have different classes for that. And for us, we just have, let's just do text white. So let's have text white. So we can come here and just within the UL, I'm going to give it a class, then give it a text white and see what we have. So do that, you can now see we have everything there visible the way it should be visible. Now, before we continue, you can see there's something that is happening. The image is not one-centered, so we have to find a way to make sure this particular image covers the whole screen. So for us to achieve that, I'm going to center this particular background, sorry, because I'm using a background image, don't forget that. I'm using a background image, and I want to make sure this particular image is centered. And for us to achieve that, we can call a class called centered. So centered. And then if you do that, come and check, nothing is happening. Center. Let me change the layout of the image by doing image cover so that it can cover the all div. So when I do that, nothing is happening. So let me just check something here. So we have big cover. Okay. Let me just confirm the class a minute. Background size. So let me check on background size, so we have BG cover, so the background size is cover. Let me just confirm that it's the right thing. And then we also change on the background size, so that is position, so BG center. So let me have that here. Okay, so come back here, nothing is happening. Let me reopen again just to confirm if everything is working. Okay, so let's just see. So I'm going to inspect to see if this should be working. So we have that. So I'm going to try to have the background size here. To be cover. Okay, I've seen what's happening. That is related to this. So we have to change the dimension of this particular div. Let's see. So what is not happening? So let's see. We have container. On screen. We have that. We have that. So cool. We'll just fix that in a minute. So don't worry. Don't worry about that. So let me just do my last inspection so that we can. Okay, so I think I can give it a width of 100%. Okay, just give me 1 second. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Just give me 1 minute. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Cool. So let's just continue. So let's just check what is not happening. So we have BG center. We have BG cover. Minimum height to be the screen. This is not working because it should be 100%. This is not working. I don't know why. Let me see. Okay. We'll fix that. So don't worry. So let's just continue with having this now. So far we have the structure of how we want this to look like. So let's jump to now styling this now. For us to style this, there are a lot of ways that you can do this. And one of the things we're going to use is we are going to use a display. Basically, how do you display the box? Rather, how do you play around with the elements within this particular div? And there are a lot of properties. We have display block, we have inline block, we have flex, we have inline flex. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have our nav, right? I'm going to have our nav, and I'm going to call a class and then define the display to be flex and see what happens. Now, if you call the display to be flex, now you come here and check on flex. Flex has different properties, and I don't feel like my CSS is referencing. Let me confirm something with my CSS. It's working, yeah. So I'm going to define this to have a display of flex. Then I'm going to align them center. That's why. Sorry guys. Sorry. Cool. So I'm going to have them displayed as flex. So if I have displayed them as flex, you can see something has happened. Now the flow has changed to now having something like, is it row, right? So we have grocery, then the about, rather we have the links and the tag. Then I'm going to display them at the center. So I'll come here and then also have the items which I have inside there. So the items are the L1, these L1, LLLI. So I'm going to have the content here displayed centered. So I'm going to call a class called item center. Cool. So have that. Nothing is going to change. And just to check on what this class does is come here, align items. So we have item center, just basically call align the items at the center. Then from there, let's have, let's call another class just to style this particular image. This image is quite big compared to what we have here. So we need to style that. So before I call the styling, we also have another attribute called the alt. So this particular alt provides an alternative text to the image. For example, when the image has not been loaded, then you will have the alternative text displayed with this particular, if that image is not loaded. So when this image is not loaded, then call the alternative text, which will be the logo. Then I'm going to define different classes. And I think the first thing we have to do is to define the width of this particular class, the width. So I'll jump here, back to the documentation, call width, and we have different width dimensions. So for example, we can let's try even 52. So I'll come here and give it a width of 52. You see if there's a change. It's getting smaller. You can see it's getting smaller. Let me have a width of maybe 40. Cool. I think that's okay. I think that's okay with that. That's okay with that image. And then after that, I think we can just have it there. Then the next is I'll jump to this so that we can achieve this. Now, for us to achieve this, I think the first thing we have to do is normally when you define the UL list, it comes with some default settings. So for example, if you Google list in HTML, just to give you an example. So normally, when you define a list, it's going to come like this. Now you can't see this because the background is black, so you can't see these two dots. So we have to do away with these dots. So how do you do away with these dots? So one, you come back here to this list themselves. Then we remove any styling that is there. Any styling that is there. So for us to achieve that using Tailwind, just come here, Google list style type. So we have none. So it means there is no any styling that's going to be, appended to this particular list. I'm going to call list none to all the lists that we have here. So I'm going to call a class. So let me just have a class list none. Remove that. So I'm going to copy this to this, this. Okay, that is the first thing I'm going to do. So that particular point, nothing is going to happen because you can't see those particular styles. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to achieve this to be like this. So before I do that, allow me to change something here. So we have the list here with the text. I'm going to convert this into what you call an anchor tag. So with an href that's going to point to somewhere, then I'm going to have that here. So let me just change that to everything that is here. It is here. Then we remove this, copy, have that there, copy, have that there. Okay, so nothing is going to change. I just want to link them to different pages. That's why I'm going to have the href. Now, for us to achieve this, again, there are a lot of ways. You can use flex property. You can also use inline block property. And because we've tried using flex, let me now try using what you call the inline block. So I'm going to have this. I'm going to give this one to be displayed inline block. So just check the width of the entire block that is going to be there. So I'll come here and just have an inline block. And I want you guys to see what is going to happen to this particular, list. Okay. So inline block, pick that, come here, give it the same, come here, give it the same, come here, and give it the same. Now, you can see something has happened. So they're being displayed concurrently next to each other because I've just converted them to what we call block elements. So we have them just next to each other because I'm trying to display them inline next to each other. Okay. So that is how you can achieve this. So what we have here. The next thing is let's have some spacing in between this particular elements, and for us to achieve the spacing, we'll do this. I'm going to give my anchor tag a class. I'm going to give my anchor tag a class, but before I do that, let me give this UL a class. I'm going to give it a flex of 1. Now, let's just come here and just check. If you come to flex property, now we have this flex of 1. So basically means move text rather to. If, for example, I'm having a block that has 20 px as the dimension, then it's going to take 20 times that, 20 times 2. So basically what I've done so far is I've just have this particular content taking certain dimension of the entire width. So a flex of 1. So just take certain dimension of that particular block. And that is why I'm having a flex of 1. And you can see what has happened. The content, rather what I had, or rather the image that I have after the UL has been pushed to the farthest point. So basically it means this image has been moved here, but this one, this UL has taken this point to this particular point. So whatever we have here has been taken by that particular UL. So what I want to do next is now I want to make sure this particular content is at the center of the space we have here. So for us to achieve that, I'll come here and I'll do text center. Basically, sorry, I'll do text center. Basically to center this particular text at the center of the space that is there. Now, we are moving on well, but we have an issue with our image. We have an issue with our background. So I don't know how we are going to fix this. So let me just check. So we have container minimum height to be screen, the background size, we will be centered. What happens if we have contain? Oh, it plays with around with that. There's an issue. It is not happening. Let me just check what is not happening here. Okay. There's something that is, so we have the body. Let me just check the background size. That is playing with around with that, so that is not the issue. So let me check div. So if I have this div and give it a width, okay. So give it a width of 100%. View width. Something that's not making sense, but I'll just fix. I'll just make sure that is fixed. Cool. So let's just continue with what we have here. Cool. So let me just provide spacing within this particular content. Now, for us to achieve spacing, we have what we call padding and margin. So the space between the element and the space outside is what we call padding. So I'm going to provide certain padding to this particular element. So what we have here. Now, for us to apply that again, jump to the documentation, just Google padding. Just Google padding, sorry, padding, enter. So we have different paddings and different properties. And for example, we have PS, so padding inline start. We have PT, which is padding top. We have PR, which is padding right. We have PX, which is padding top and bottom. And what I want to do is I want to use PX, which is padding left and right. So basically what we have here and here. So I'm going to provide that space using PX. So I'll come here and give it a PX. So which means padding right and left. Then now you can give it any dimensions. For me, I'm going to use, I think 3 is okay. So you can see now I have some space between home and about. So I'll provide the same spacing to the other elements. So come here, do that, come here, do that. Cool. So you can see if I do that, now I have the content and I have the links kind of separated in a very good way. So basically, almost the same thing that we have here. Do we have any question up to that particular point before we continue? Set the maximum height. Thank you, Newton. I want to try that. So let me try and set the maximum height to be whatever it's going to get. So I'm going to do there and set maximum height. I want maximum width. Cool. Thank you so much. So maximum width to be none so that it can take the entire screen. Thank you so much for that. So you come here, Google maximum height, okay? Maximum height to be none. So we have maximum height to be none. So let's check where we have maximum height to be none. Cool. We have max none. So I'll come with that and have that there. So if we have that, then we should have something. So we can't have minimum and maximum. So we have that to the image or the div container. Sorry, maximum width, height. Maximum width to be that. That should work. Thank you so much for that. Do we have any question before we continue? And if you don't have any question, let me get a thumbs up before I recap on what we've done so far. Thank you, Maxwell Okoth. Cool. So silence means we are okay. Again, just to do a recap of what we've done so far is we've just created a structure and we have a div. And then within that particular div, we have the minimum height screen and the maximum width. And then we also have the background image that we have there. And then we also have the background size to be covered. So it covers the entire div that is there. And then we also make sure that that particular image is centered. So we have the image at the center of this particular div. Then into that particular div, we have the navigation. So within the navigation, we have 3 major parts. We have the first image, which is the logo. We also have the navigation links, where we have the home, about, and the contact. And then we also have the last image. Now, what I've done so far within the image, I've just given it a certain width. So this particular image, just give it a certain width. You can play around with that the way you want. You can even go around and maybe give it even 35, just to see the way that particular image works. Now, if you see, I've given it 35, and that is not working. And the reason is this particular class is not there within Tailwind. So make sure the classes that you're calling here are what we have within the Tailwind. So if you go to with, we don't have 35. We don't have 35, and you can see there are multiples of 2, so make sure you have that in mind. So the only next that we can have is 36 instead of 35. So we have 36. So if you do that, come back here. Cool. You can see the image is getting smaller. And then what we have done so far here is just make sure that the display is in line, and then you're providing, spacing on the left and the right within this particular content. The spacing provide that using what we call padding, and that is what we have so far. Now I'll jump to the next image, and for the next image I'll give it an alternative image, alternative text. So it's going to be cut, because that is the cut that we have there. Cool. Sorry about that, guys. So I'm going to provide this with an alternative text. Just give me a second, please. So I'm going to give it an alternative text. Then I'm also going to give it a width and height. So I'm going to call a class. I'm going to call a class. So I'm going to give it a width. So again, let's jump to the documentation. So you can give it a very small width and height. So let's see. So let's start with width of maybe 4 and height of maybe 4. Come back here. You can see it's now getting smaller. It's now a bit smaller compared to what we had initially. I think just giving it a width can also work. So let's see. Cool. So let me give it a width of 4. You can see it's now working well. Now you can see right now the content is pushed at the farthest end. So I want to move this particular content at the center. Now for what we can do here is I think we can provide some padding. So you can provide some padding at the left, right, top, and bottom. And for us to achieve that, again, let me just come here and let's check on padding. Okay, again, we said you can provide padding Y, so on the Y axis, and padding on the X axis. So I want to provide a padding on the Y and X axis, and I'm going to provide that padding to the whole container. So this, I'll say provide padding on the Y axis, and I think we can give it 32. Let's see what we have. That is quite big. Let's just give it a padding of 3. Cool, that is better. Then I'll provide padding on the right. So px, again, padding on the right. And we can give it let's give it 24, we see. Yep, something like that. So that, I think that is okay. Probably the same thing. Cool. So right now you can see we have the navigation bar, which has been achieved, and that is what we have here. So up to that particular point, do we have any question before we continue to the last bit? Cool. So let's jump to the last portion, and I'm going to be fast because of time. My laptop is also yelling at me. Now, so we have this. So the next part is now having the image and the text. So again, I'm going to do is I'm going to have this image here. So just within the UL, I'm going to have another div. Then into this particular div, again, you can see we have h1 and something. So just give me a minute, guys. Sorry. Let me just close something here. Okay, sorry guys, sorry. Okay, where are you? Here you are. Cool. So let's build this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a div. Just after the navigation bar, I'm going to have a div. Then I'm going to have an h1. So let me just create the structure. I'm going to have an h1. Then make sure this one has a closing tag. Then going to have grocery deliver in that. So let me just have grocery deliver in 15 minutes. 15 minutes, so we have that. Then I'm going to define a paragraph just to have something. Let me just Google certain text, CSS, something like that. Just make sure you have descriptive information there. I'm just having this because of time, so we have that. So that at the end of the day, we are going to have something like, oh, nothing is happening. The reason is this has to be cool. So you can see we have the text, but the text is black. So I'm going to change the text to white. Again, for us to do that, we call a class, and I'm going to call text to be white. Then everything there should be white. You can see that is happening. Then you can see we have certain, the content is moved in the middle of that particular, rather the center. So we're also going to do that. And for us to achieve that, I'm going to give it a margin. So margin is the space between the divs. I'm going to give it a margin top so that it can move downwards. So I'll come here again, margin M, top is top, then give it a value. So we can start with 32 and see what is happening. You can see it has moved downwards, but not really at the center. So I think we can use, let's use even 40. Margin 40, I think that's better. That's better. So margin, margin top. So basically create some space between these particular divs. So I have that here. And then what you can do is so let's make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to I'm going to give this h1 a class. So I'm going to give it a class. So I'm going to make the text bigger. So text XL. So if you come here and check on text size, sorry, font size, not text size, font size. Text XL basically means to have a dimension, rather 20px. So just give this 20px, but that is not that big. So we can make it more bigger. So let's do 3xl. So make it 3 times bigger. Cool. You can see we are having progress. So we are having progress. Then I'm going to make it a little bit bold. You can see it's bold. And for us to do that, you just come here and check font weight. Font weight. So we have bold, so font weight to be 600px. So let me use font semi-bold. I'll come here, give it that semi-bold. You can see we are almost having the same thing that is here. Then so fonts, I want to add spacing to this particular. Let me provide a line height first. So I'm going to provide a line height so that if you check what is happening here, they're separated. So what I'm going to do is let me separate them first. Now for me to separate them, I'm going to make sure I have this within a span. And do that. So when I do that, kindly check what is happening. Kindly check what is happening. So instead of having the span, let me provide a break between these two things. So I'm going to have a line break. Basically, it's going to move this content downwards, cool, so that we can achieve this. Okay. So if I provide a break, you can see it has moved downwards, but the text is not that big. Okay, it's not that big, but it's okay. But at least we are heading somewhere. I think we can change. Let me see. Font size. I want something that is kind of bigger. Let's go with even 8xl. We see what happens when you do that. That is quite big. 5. Cool. I think that is okay for now. So we have that here. Then the next thing is we are going to make this 15. 15 is not that bold, and for us to achieve that, we are going to wrap that within a span. Then have 15 there. Then when I do that, I can now style that 15 alone, and I'm going to make the font to be kind of weight. So I'll have a class, call it font light. Is it light or lighter? I think light is okay. Yeah, you can now, it's now having 15. Now, something that is happening here. This one is not moving, but we will fix that in a minute. But so far, what we have here is basically what we have here. So let's now work on this particular content. Now, for us to work on this particular content, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it very simple. I'm going to make this particular page responsive based on the device that I'm going to use. Now, for me to achieve this, what I'm going to tell is if at any point I get a certain, rather, when I get a certain device, kindly apply this particular rules. So I'll come to my div, right, and say, let's provide a maximum dimension, rather, let's provide a maximum width to any device that is extra large. So XL means extra large. So if, for example, I come here, it's going to take the dimension of this particular div when I try to access any device. So just give it a maximum width of XL. So that's why when I do that, I'm going to have this particular content wrapped the way it is wrapped. So do we have any question up to that particular point before I jump to the last portion, because my machine is almost going off? Cool. So let me just move on, and then you ask me a question at the end. Now, the last bit is having this particular image. I'm not going to have the buttons. I'll give you that as an homework. So let me just do this particular image. Now, for this particular image, I'm going to have it at the end of this particular div. So I'm going to have an image here. Image is a self-closing tag. Then I'm going to have the source. The source is going to be assets, images. Then I think it's the grocery image. Probably. Yep, cool. It's the grocery image. Now, for me to move this particular image to the position it has, I'm going to do something. So first of all, I'm going to make sure it takes the full width. So I'm going to provide a class called width to be full. So take the full width.
Hey, Albert, would you confirm that you're still speaking? Albert, if you're speaking, you are on mute. Hey, Albert. Oh, yeah, that's right. He had mentioned that his laptop was dying. As we wait for him to come back, feel free to drop any questions on the chat box would be best so that he can take them up once he comes back. I'll just try check on him on call. Just go on and ask your questions on the chat box.
Oh, sorry guys, sorry guys. I think I was muted for some time. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. So what I'm doing so far is I'm going to use different breakpoints to move this particular image to the position that I want. Okay. Now, if you check on the documentation, I hope this thing won't disturb me again. We have different breakpoints prefix. So XL means on a screen that has this particular dimension. LG means on a screen that has this particular dimension. So I'm saying that when you get a device that has this particular dimension, then, okay, so when you get a device that has XL, that is 1280px, then do something, okay? So basically that will depend on the screen, or rather the device that you're using. So that is what I'm going to use to have the image to get to this particular position. So what I've done so far is I've given this particular image a width of full, just take the full width. And then when you get this particular device, take the width, take a half of, take the width to be a half. Then when you also get this particular device, then I want to change the position to be absolute. Make it absolute. Make sure we have that here. Excel. I think that is the spelling. Yeah. And I need to check what is happening. So when I have that, it's not working. Just give me a minute. So when I have this is absolute, then it means I also have to set my parent to have a relative positioning. So I'm going to have that here. Then check what happened. What's going to happen? So we have relative, and then we have the absolute here. So let me check absolute positioning. So we have absolute. So you see where we have the absolute positioning. So that is the point we have the absolute. So I'm going to have that to be there. So take the absolute to be here. Then I'm also going to set this to be relative, so that will be working. Just a second. Sorry guys, I was trying to fix my power, but it seems I'm going to drop off in a few minutes. So let me just have the position here to be relative. Then after having relative positioning, I'm going to give it an absolute. The image is source class full Excel, take a half. It seems my CSS has not picked again. So just give me a second. Cool. Then I'm going to give it a bottom of 0. Bottom. So we have this. Something is not right here. Just give me a second. Mhm. Mhm. It's absolute. Give it bottom. Bottom of 0. Then you're going to give it. Going to move it right. Right of 0, so that we can have something like that. Second, guys. Cool. So let's try that. So I'll come here and do Excel. We are going to give it a width of a half. Then do Excel again. We are going to give it an absolute position. Then we're going to give it a bottom of 0 and see what we have. Cool. So we can see we have that. Then I'm going to give it a right. So basically move it to the right of 0. So when I do this, you can see the image basically has moved to the right of the content. So basically that is how you can try to achieve this. Basically, when you get a device that has this particular rather dimension, XL, make sure the image is going to take the width to be a half, right? Then the position is going to be absolute. Then the bottom is going to have 0. Don't have any spacing on the bottom, and then don't have any spacing on the right. So basically that will position that particular image at the right of that particular content. So do we have any question up to that particular point? Do we have any question? My machine is almost going off. I don't have any power. So I'll basically join using my mobile.
I believe his laptop went off, so we'll just give him a few minutes to join using his mobile phone. Please bear with us. Unless you can hear me, Albert. In the meantime, if you still have questions, let's utilize the chat box, and as soon as he comes back, he'll take up the questions. I can see some of you requesting for the images, so this is all noted. Albert, I've given you co-host, right? So you can go on. Yes, I'll be sharing the recording for this recap as well.
Okay, just give me a second, please.
Albert, are you still there? Okay, let me check in with him. I'll be back.
Okay, am I audible, guys?
Yes, you are.
Am I audible? Kindly confirm, kindly.
Yes, you are
Yes.
audible.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me just continue. Let me finish up. So far what we've done so far is, I'm sharing my screen in a second. So far what I've done is I've been able to achieve this, and the way to go around that, again, just to explain what I've done, is I've just told my device that each time I'm going to have a device that has these particular dimensions, then make sure that that particular image is going to take these particular dimensions, and also make sure that the positioning is at absolute. And then I'm telling that that particular image at the bottom don't have any space, and then also at the right don't have any space. So when you do that, at the end of the day, you are going to achieve this stylings. But wait, something has happened to our content, which is this. So what might have happened? So what might have happened? So I think we can check on. So we have the bottom. So we have the font to be this, font to be that. So let's just give it this some padding. So I'm going to have this a class. Then I'm going to give it a padding of, for example, 4. That's not working. So let's give it a padding top of 4, so we can move this image down. So basically it means we so I think we can play around with this. Let's give it 48 to see. It's not working. So just a second. So we can play around with this. Let's just see. This margin top. This is okay. So I think we can come here. Let's provide. Let's give it a line height, and for us to have a line height, we do leading. Let's remove what is not happening. Are we using the right one? Something has happened. Even the text itself. Is it because we're using this? That should not be the case. Oh, okay. Sorry guys, sorry guys, sorry. I was using the wrong screen dimension. So basically, we are going to have something of this sort when we have this particular styling. So the last thing that I want us to do is now to provide uh, the buttons that we had earlier. So let me just show you what we had. So we had these particular buttons. So I'm going to do this, then I'll give you guys an assignment on how to do that. So we're going to have that button here. And for us to have that button, we are first going to have an anchor tag. We are going to have an anchor tag there. We are going to have an anchor tag inside there. So we are going to, what should we do? So let's do this. Let's just have it inside a div so that we can style it in a very easy way. So I'm going to create a div here. Then I'm going to have an anchor tag here, 2 of them. I'm going to have an anchor tag. The anchor tag is order now. Order now. And if we have that, we are going to should have something here. You can see we have order now. Not pretty much that we have something. So we're going to provide styling to this particular order now. And the first thing you can see it as a background color. So I'll come here, provide a class. and give it a BG. Now, if you are keen on what you are doing, if you check on background color, we can even have BG. Let's just have background color. Sorry, color. So we have different color, and for us to apply a color to the background, you call BG with the color. So for example, for us, we can see we have this, so we can check on that particular color here. So the color I think is yellow, just confirm. So let's just give it a background, BG yellow. Then we are going to provide a shade of yellow. So let's have 600. So come here, you can see we have that. So that 600 is not, consensus we have that. That is not going to work. So let's provide 800. Not working. So I think 600 is okay. Probably more the same. It's okay. Then you're going to have rounded corner. It's going to have rounded corner. So I'll call these edges. So I'll say rounded. And then we are going to provide. Let me have 3XL, so it can be a little bit bigger. So you can see I have that there. Then I'm going to provide padding on both X and Y. So I'll say PY. So PY, maybe have 3. And you can see now we have some padding top right. Then I'm going to provide also on the left and Y, left and right. So that is PX. So I'm going to provide PX of maybe 8. Do that. You can see I'm having a text, right? I'm having something. But the text needs to be down that particular content, rather that particular paragraph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this div a class, and I'm going to provide a padding top, or maybe let me give it 20. You can see now I'm having something. So padding is the space between this, and then margin is the space between the text. So I'm going to provide a padding. You can see I've given it a padding of 20, and that's why I have this particular button moved down. What's up to that particular point? Do we have any question? Do we have any question? Thumbs up if we are at least together. Thumbs up if we are at least together. Thank you so much. Thank you for the guys who are reacting at the chat. Cool. I think basically that is what we were supposed to cover during this presentation. I know I have one button that is not done, and purposely for you guys to try that. Let me change this. This is kind of, I think we can go around with 300. I think it's not very much. Yeah. Cool. I think that brings me to the end of okay. So how do you make a page responsive? Now, If you want to make a page responsive, again, based on the example that I've given you right now, use different breakpoints and then you provide different stylings based on whatever you want to achieve. For example, if you go to, let's just jump to the official documentation where you, so for example, if you're using Tailwind CSS, using Tailwind CSS, and then just check on responsive designer. Now, depending on different breakpoints, then you're going to attach certain styles. For example, what this guy is telling this particular image is, by default, the image size is 16. For example, for us, by default, this particular image is going to take the width to be full. But now, if at any point it gets a device that is an XL, and how do you define an XL? An XL is a device that has a minimum width to be this. So if at any point it gets a device that has a minimum width of this, then it's going to take the width to be a half, and also the positioning as absolute. That is why if, for example, I do away with this, or rather, if I do away with this, you can see this thing is going to be distorted. But if I have an absolute here, you can see I'm having this, but now it means the width must also be a half for that to work. Okay, but now I've not done this. Basically, what I've done is I'm saying if at any point you get a device that is an XL, take the width to be a half and the positioning to be absolute. So basically, that is how you play around with making a page responsive. So depending on these particular breakpoints, then provide different styling that you'll want. I hope I've answered that question. Thumbs up, neutral.
Nathan, are we okay? Or do you have a follow-up question? In the meantime, someone has their hand up. I believe Amos. Do you have a question?
Hello.
Yes,
I
go on.
have a suggestion. So, can you hear me?
Yes, go on.
Oh, so I have a suggestion. So, for me, when building my web apps, uh, I use the padding because the margin usually brings a disaster when doing the responsive part. So, for me, I use the padding most of the time because the margin is a bit harder doing the responsive part.
Okay, I think there's no. I think one of the things you're supposed to know is the difference between the margin and the padding. Okay, if you at any point use a lot of margin and padding, you are going to get how do you call it, an overlay both on the x and the y axis. Okay? So again, it depends with whatever, or rather, it depends with your end goal. As long as what you are able to achieve whatever you want to with the margin and the padding, that's okay. But the key point is that, do you know the breakpoints of this particular devices? Because that is how you're going to make the page, or rather going to make the website responsive. I hope that helps. Cool. I think I'll pass it over if back to the host if there is no question. And thank you
Okay.
guys.
All right. Thank you very much, Albert. Do we have more questions before we come to the end of the session? Going once. If you're too shy to unmute, the chat box is also, you can also utilize the chat box. All right. I think I'll take silence as a no. Okay, yes, John. Oh, no, that's not a question. All right. Thank you very much for your participation. The session has been very engaging. A huge shout out to you, Albert, for taking us through the session. Despite the hiccups with your network, connection and laptop. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. So we'll be having follow-up sessions from next year. Unfortunately, this is our last session this year. But like I mentioned, you can still check out moringaschool.com for our course offerings. One particular one is the Foundations of Software Engineering, which is beginner friendly. So if you're just starting your journey in software engineering or you're curious about software engineering, this is a perfect course for you because it's beginner friendly, it is affordable, it is short. In 5 weeks, you'll have gotten the gist of software engineering. So register for the course on the website, moringaschool.com, Foundations of Software Engineering. The class starts on Jan 6th. So the earlier you start, the better your chances to join the boot camp. Because once you're done with the foundations course, you go into the boot camp if you're successful. But from us, Moringa School team, this is it. We've come to the end of the session. We are really appreciative of the time that you have spared to be with us, to join us. And I have a recording of this session, so I'll be sharing with you if you've joined late or if you joined when the session had just started. I'll be sharing the recording with you so you can go through it at your own time. But for now, I would like to end it here. And that's it. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evening. Albert, there's one
Thank you.
last question. Do you want to take that up or should you just go on? Should you just end it here?
I think I've answered him on the
Okay,
chat. I've answered.
perfect. All right. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Hello. Nilikuwa naomba email ya Albert.
Albert, let me send it to you on text, on the chat box.